Biden running around the country, pointing out all of the things that are being done. You've got all of these investing in America displays going on, and all of the pointing out of what's being done. I find it interesting that Republicans haven't tried to repeal any of his things. Now, remember my Republican friends in Congress, they were hell-bent on undoing Biden's legacy. They haven't done much. I mean, legislatively, the House has done virtually nothing. But didn't they promise to do a whole bunch of this stuff? What they are doing is they're willing to take credit for some of this stuff that they weren't on board with. The infrastructure bill, the stuff that's coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is actually working. Again, I'm in this place where we're supposed to be at odds. We're supposed to be hating each other and tearing each other apart. And the question is it working? And are we going to continue to allow it to work? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to today, lots to talk about. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I found it interesting. The folks over at More Perfect Union had a story today that grabbed my attention. And we've had these folks on the show over the couple of times over the years. It's this group, RIP Medical Debt. What they do is they go and they buy up a bunch of medical debt, and then they, for pennies on the dollar, and they wipe out people's medical debt. And they were this time evidently this church, this Trinity Moravian Church in North Carolina, bought nearly $3.3 million in medical debt for the local residents, people who would didn't have any money, they couldn't pay the bill, so they got this debt hanging over their head, and their credit ratings are being destroyed. Well, they bought up this debt. And you go, wow, where does a small church in North Carolina get all this debt? Well, they paid about $15,000 for it, to tell you just how much destroys people's lives. Or I guess the right response is how little it is that destroys people's lives. Then this church held what they said was a debt jubilee ceremony, and they burnt up all the debt and canceled all of it. It was a great thing, and it was a celebration, and it was uplifting, and it was all these things. And I'm not taking anything away from that. Good on the good folks at Trinity Moravian Church and places across the country who do this. In this moment, it is something that is desperately needed. But this is where I get a little frustrated with our media. It's all of these stories that, aren't these heartwarming, great, feel-good stories, like the 100-year-old guy who's the greeter at Walmart, because he can't afford his medication. He got to work. There's this where they're taking up collections to pay off people's debts. There's all these things where you go, These are sadly signs of a system in failure. Now, this is nice. This is nice work, and I am not diminishing what these folks are doing. It's how we view it. The fact that $3.3 million in medical expenses went unpaid, that means the rest of the system absorbed that. That means that your premiums went up, the costs for aspirins went up, the costs for other medical treatments go up because $3.3 million didn't get paid because we don't have a system that ensures that everyone gets access to care. We just saddle them with a lifetime of debt. Well, this group has figured out how to go and do what the vultures do. Because understand what happens if you don't pay your debts. The hospital just writes it off. It comes off of their taxes. It comes off their net profit, loss, gain, whatever. And then they sell it to a third party for literally pennies because they know they're getting nothing out of it. They know that they're not going to be able to track down this money. They're mostly poor and working class folks who just don't have it. Because we have a law in this country that says hospitals can't let you die at that moment. They've got to provide you at least enough care to ensure that in that moment you don't die before they push you back out the door, or in the case of the hospitals in Los Angeles, drop you off on Skid Row. So we then have the vultures who, after you've been somewhat taken care of, pushed out the door, run up a huge emergency room bill, then the vultures come in and start harassing you and constantly harassing. And you go, don't we have a better system? Because here's the thing, you and I can't then go and buy up our medical debt like this RIP medical debt group does because they act as one of these vultures. Only they buy it and then get rid of it. They don't call and harass and intimidate and do all of those things that we've seen. And the frustrating part of this is our system. And I think we're better than this. I mean, the reality is we have the highest medical expenses of any country in the world, and we have the most expensive healthcare system in the entire world. Yet we don't get the best care. Now, if you're able to pay, if you're fortunate enough to have the resources, yeah, you're going to get reasonable care. But we've got long wait times. We've got negative outcomes. We've got all kinds of stuff where you would think with the amount of money that we're spending, we'd be a little bit better off. And again, for me, it comes back to the policy stuff. The fact that we're spending the money. $3.3 million in expenses went out. It didn't get paid. The system absorbed it. It raised the costs for everybody else. Had we a system that ensured that point of service gets paid to where we don't have all of this stuff, costs would come down. But we're never going to do that because there's too much money in it. It's too much money in it for the healthcare industry, healthcare incorporated, and too much money in it for the vultures. It's a sad thing. I want to get to a couple of emails real quick. Sandy, listening on KTRC in Santa Fe, New Mexico, pointed out, she said, Rick, I listened to your opening this evening. This was yesterday. I kept nodding my head in agreement with you. We don't hear much common sense in our media. As you said, whether it's gun rights or trans rights, we're not supposed to solve any problems. Glad to hear you here in New Mexico. Keep up the great work. And I firmly believe that. We're not supposed to come up with any solutions. Our government, the way it's set up at this moment, simply not. And I look at Tennessee. The reason something happened in Tennessee is you got one guy, Bill Lee. He signed this executive order. Will we see the General Assembly move? I don't think so. And Tennessee is turned into a radical state. And I've had people go, well, how did it happen? Well, there was a story today over at NBC News that pointed out it's the redistricting. It's the gerrymandering. It's the fact that they've been packing and cracking and doing everything they can do to make districts not even close to competitive. And when you have that kind of extremism, it's easy to go off the path. And this is where we've gotten for far too long. It's no longer competing over ideas. It's who can out crazy on the fringes. And you could argue this is both sides. I would gerrymander, and I'm in favor of gerrymandering if the goal is 50-50 districts. if the goal is to make them even districts where people then have to really go out and fight for every vote, to where your vote actually matters. Because today, they've already chosen who their voters are. So I look at places like Tennessee. How'd you get so extreme? That's how. Because none of those representatives who voted to expel those black representatives, they have no fear of repercussion. They don't care what the voters say back home. That's a big part of it. Brian sent me an email listening at WCPT AM 820 in Chicago. He says, "Holy blank." It's not the real word he used, but I can't say that. Holy blank. As a longtime listener, I've heard you take on many controversial positions and issues to tick off the right and the left. And last night you did it again, taking on trans rights, of which I am in 100% agreement. I got to tell you, I got to stop right here for a minute. I don't think that my position is controversial at all. I think mine is the middle of the road position that the vast majority of Americans believe. I think that I think I'm in the majority on most of the things. Just want to throw that out. He said, but first you said it, and then Howard Stern said the same thing. When did shock jocks become the voice of reason? I am not a shock jock, but thank you. I guess I'm in that category now. He says all you hear from the right is anger, hatred, and division. And what he's talking about is Howard Stern evidently came out and said that he's not bothered with gay people or trans people. And he said, they don't impact my life. I love when people are in love. You want to be a woman, be a woman. You want to be a dude, be a dude. Be whatever you blanking want to be with the F word. As long as you ain't hurting anybody, I'm on your team. And he said that he wished he could get Kid Rock to come on the show and tell him why. Why are you so upset about this? How is it so hurtful? I don't know why he gets so upset. And we're in the same world. I'm guessing Howard Stern now listens to the show. I don't know. But this is one of those things that I don't think it's controversial. I think most people are in the world, live your life. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, do your thing. Just don't force others to do it. And look, I don't see that happening. But here's the part that I get to, Brian. And this is the part that where my mind goes. I've never been a shock jock, and I've never really wanted to do this radio gig. But there were about 5 years, and this is going back about 10 years ago, when I was trying to figure out how to do radio as well as I could, how to do this as the best of my ability. So, as a truck driver, I never imagined that I would be doing this. I never planned on doing this. I've never even wanted to do it, to be honest. But I fell into it. And I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I went to about 5 years in a row, the Talkers Magazine's conventions in New York. And I got to meet all of the right-wing talkers and all of the big-name people. I met Hannity. I met, the cold one, Ann Coulter. I met Alex Jones, all down the list. I could spend, the next 20 minutes naming all the people. And the one thing that I came away from that time period with is, and I've said this before on the show, I don't know that they actually believe what they're saying, because those conventions were all about the sale. It was all about the business of radio and how to maximize every quarter, how to maximize every word, to profitize it, and how to, there was so much of that. And it got me to this position where I don't know that they actually believe it. They just know it's profitable. So I look at a lot of the extreme positions, not as this is what people believe, but it's what's profitable. This for me is not why I'm doing this. This for me is about making a better place for my kids and my grandkids in the future of this country, not what's saleable. I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for the emails. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day New York City transit workers in TWU Local 100 ended their 11-day walkout. The strike occurred in the context of hard times for New York City workers. The city had teetered on the edge of municipal bankruptcy just a few years earlier. Unrelenting inflation and austerity measures against municipal workers had taken its toll. Years of recession meant freezes in hiring and promotions. It also meant increasingly dangerous working conditions. The MTA cut back funding for basic maintenance, investment, and service. Derailments, accidents, and fires were common, and crime soared at stations and bus stops. Transit workers found themselves operating malfunctioning equipment and confronted by frustrated and angry riders. With wages frozen, cost of living adjustments or COLA capped, and the establishment of a 3-tiered pension plan, workers had had enough. They walked out on the first day of the month, demanding a 30% wage increase, quarterly COLA, and increased vacation time. New York City Mayor Ed Koch opposed the workers' demands, fearing any victory for the union would ruin upcoming contract negotiations with the city's 300,000 municipal workers. He also used the strike as an occasion to whip up anti-union sentiment. While the contract was voted up by a 3-1 margin, labor historian Joshua Freeman notes that the 1980 strike ended up in victory that many transit workers saw as a defeat. Workers won a 17% wage increase over 2 years, a 3% cost of living adjustment, and increased contributions to the Health and Welfare Fund. But they also had to concede to reduced breaks, 2-tiered wages, and increased job duties across classifications. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
My city's daily newspaper has gotten so emaciated it should be in hospice care. Its front section is down to 6 pages, half of which are cheap ads, and nearly all of its articles are out-of-date cut-and-paste pieces bought from out-of-state content providers. This embarrassment, put out by the Gannett chain of over 1,100 cadaverous papers, pretends to be the news source for Austin, a vibrant city of 1 million people and the capital of the second-largest state in America. Gannett, owned by a multi-billion-dollar Japanese hedge fund, profits by buying up local papers, firing most of the news staff, raising prices, selling off the paper's assets, then killing the paper. If your town's publication is now a Gannett property, look to Salinas, California for its future. The 152-year-old Salinas Californian was this important region's main news artery until its new hedge fund owners started hacking. The paper was down to 1 reporter last December, but that lone journalist quit. And the Californian is now a newspaper without reporters, meaning no coverage of elections, city hall, sports, police, workplace issues, etc. The Salinas paper is technically alive, overseen until recently by another Gannett paper located 300 miles away. Now, says the chain's comically named Center for Community Journalism, Salinas residents can get their news by reading Gannett's national paper, USA Today. This is Jim Hightower saying, actually, Gannett's bosses are making major investments in themselves. CEO Mike Reed's salary this year is $8 million, and the global chain's owners will spend $100 million for a stock buyback scheme that will artificially jack up their own wealth. This is a blockbuster story of real news affecting real people and democracy itself. So how many Gannett newspapers do you guess are covering it?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I talk about a lot about communities coming together and fighting for better opportunities, for better stuff, the commons. And tomorrow marks the 89th anniversary of workers in Toledo, Ohio doing that. It's the 89th anniversary of the auto light strike, the electric auto light strike. And a couple of years ago, we were there. There's a monument there, and had a couple of historians come in and share the stories about what happened and how the community came together. And it's one of those really important strikes that I thought we should mark the occasion by having, probably in my view, one of the top labor historians in the country come on and share his thoughts. That's why I've asked my friend Eric Loomis to come share some thoughts. He's a professor, historian, lawyers, guns and money blogger, but more importantly, the author of the most important book, A History of America in 10 Strikes. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, I look at the anniversary, the 89th anniversary of this, and for me, the message that came out of it was a community that pulled together that you don't see today.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the really short version of the story, and we can go into more detail if you want to, is that you had a bunch of workers who were trying to form unions, who were working for this plant called the Electro Auto Light Company that basically made starters and other such things for the auto industry. They have some very initial unions. It's pretty tough. But the companies tried to crack down on that. They want to stop any unions from coming in at all. And what ends up happening, in short, is that the local community really comes out in full force when they go on strike. There's some sort of radicals that come in to help them out, some ministers and some other pretty radical people, and they go on strike against the companies. The company throws the leadership into prison, and then they try to break the strike. They're going to bring in strike breakers. And when they do that, the community of Toledo, the masses of unemployed, this is 1934, it's very high unemployment, they come together and they basically stop the National Guard from opening the plant where the governor of Ohio had sent in the National Guard. There's pretty much a 5-day standoff. A couple of people actually die. The National Guard kills a couple of workers, and eventually the workers have a pretty big victory there. And it's one of the critical moments in that radical year of 1934 that lays the groundwork for the kind of big time social legislation that you see in the later 1930s, the National Labor Relations Act, the Social Security Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and other critical laws that basically create the outlines of dignified work for Americans.
No, and in talking about it, I was reminded that again the community did come together, but this is one of those times where the company threw everything they could and did all of the things that were very common. But out of it, as you pointed out, came this legislation because this stuff was going on across the country. These kind of moments were happening where there was unrest, and the unemployed who had, as I remember it, and you're the historian here, were always used to break these strikes. We're always standing outside of the window, waiting to replace the people inside. And this is one of the few times where that didn't happen.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the early 30s is that when you see unemployment rise so high, at the peak of the Depression in the winter of 33, so a little more than a year before this, 25% of Americans were unemployed, and about 25% more were underemployed, were barely getting any work at all. And so there's this massive unemployment, and certainly there are cases you can find where unemployed people were brought into strike breakers, but there is an unusual amount of solidarity actions that are taking place at that time. Unemployed workers marches, for example, demands for jobs, a kind of growing understanding coming out of the organizing culture of that time that working as a scab was not really going to pay off for you in any kind of meaningful way in terms of a long-term job or even a much of a short-term check for your family. And so you have these moments in which the unemployed sort of serve as a kind of general group, kind of a solidarity group with the workers, because what they're seeing is that all members of the working class are basically, they have the same interest at this point in time. And for once, they're really acting on it. And when they do act on that, it really leaves the companies with few cards to play. Yeah. Even when the state of Ohio brings the National Guard, that level of resistance, really made a lot of people in Ohio think, how far do we really want to take this? And the Ohio National Guard, the Ohio political establishment really backs off of it.
No, back in 2013, we did a labor history tour, went across the country and found stories like this. And we were in Kansas City at one of the auto plants. And the guy, took us upstairs and said, out of this window and in that field, there would be, 5,000 people waiting for someone to get fired to replace them. And everyone knew that if they were to go on strike, those 5,000 people would probably walk in the door. And that's why I think this is so important, because, at the time that was kind of prevalent in a number of places we went. So, in looking at, granted, this is 89 years ago, and I have people all the time say, well, we needed unions back then. What's the message in this for today? What do we take from what happened 89 years ago today?
Well, I think that what we take from it is that when communities actually come together and engage in solidarity actions for workers that are on strike, that they can actually make a significant difference. The idea that, we are all these sort of passive observers that can't do anything to, really change the country, I think is something that really benefits the corporate elite, because we can. Because you see that over and over again, right? It doesn't even necessarily take that many people to really put a halt to various forms of exploitation, or at least to, make the forces of order respond in a different kind of a way. And you've seen this recently with things like the teacher strikes that we've seen all over the country and have continued to see in such as in Los Angeles last week or the other week, in that these workers are going on strike for reasons that really touch the heart of the community. And even though it inconveniences parents, the parents are effectively engaging in solidarity actions by coming up and working out childcare and effectively supporting the strike, because they know it's going to make the school a better place, because they know it's going to be better for their children. And so, even a relatively passive action like that actually can really matter, because I think that in those kind of cases, what these school districts have been counting on is for angry parents to denounce the teachers or denounce the school workers and place pressure on those teachers and school workers to go back on the job in subpar conditions. That hasn't happened. The teachers unions and school worker unions have won, quite significant gains. So I think that's just one example of the way that can work today.
No, I think it's the message is important, because across industries, we should understand that the person who's walking on that picket line, we've got more in common with than the person standing up in that office window or in those corporate boardrooms.
Yeah, and I think that so often, in the United States, this is forgotten about, or it is, there's a sort of an active propaganda campaign against this, or against the idea of solidarity, right? This idea that we have something in common with the millionaire class, or even the employer class, right? Maybe they're not millionaires, but they're our employer, or they're our foreman's employer, or something like this. These people have nothing in common with us at all, right? They exist to take basically take the profits and the work that we generate and turn them into private gain for themselves, while providing us as little as possible. And this really exists throughout the economy. Yes, of course it exists in, what's left of the auto industry in the US, and it exists at Amazon, and exists at McDonald's, but it also exists really in white collar jobs too. And we have very low outside of things like college professors, we have very little unionization in white collar jobs, but effectively the same thing's happening. And there's this sort of belief that we're all on the same page, but obviously we're not on the same page, because when the rubber meets the road, that employer is going to throw you under the bus and take the profits. And we see this over and over and over again in American labor history, as well as contemporary labor.
No, absolutely. And thinking about where we're heading, because I've been paying a lot of attention to the conversation around AI, which nobody's really paying attention to. We're at a major moment in transition, a technological change. I mean, it's going to make the Industrial Revolution, look like a blink on the page. This is going to be horrible, and workers don't have the power to defend their jobs or get any kind of help in transitions or any of that stuff in this moment, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, we're not, when we're thinking about something like AI and, large scale automation, self-driving vehicles and these sorts of things, I've also long suggested and have been worried about this, and suggested that we need a more forward-thinking plan around this, because if this actually happens, we have to understand the development of new technology exists at the workplace in order to take more profits away from workers and place them in corporate hands. We already have the largest income inequality we've seen in this country since the 1920s. That's only going to get worse. And I think, though, that right now what we don't have is a kind of politicized movement to say, provide a government guaranteed job for all workers, regardless of, this issue of automation. So go ahead and automate, but, we're going to find different ways to provide you with work, which, can incorporate certain things, say, that came out of the COVID experiments, with direct funding of people, but also can sort of rethink what work really is, so that people can still be providing people could be providing useful things to society, in ways in which they can live a dignified life and get wages for it, even if maybe some of this other work is now being automated. But these are not conversations that very many people are having, and there's certainly the possibility there of a very rapid, and very disturbing change that could be coming down the road much sooner than we think. If we don't have those conversations now, we're not really going to be prepared to deal with it.
No, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Eric Loomis. He's a professor, historian, blogger over at Lawyers, Guns, and Money blog, also the author of A History of America in 10 Strikes. We'll get links out on social media how you can pick that up. An incredible read and a very important one. But back to this, this AI thing, because, going back to the lessons learned from the past, are we capable of ramping up much like my grandparents' generation did? I remember hearing stories about, when they came back from the war, and even in this time period of communities, doing this stuff. We've been trained for so long to be hooray for me and the hell with everybody else. Is this something that's possible without the kind of mass pain and suffering that you saw in the 30s?
Well, I think there's reasons to be optimistic, and there's also reasons to be concerned. I mean, on the latter, you're absolutely correct. We live in an extremely individualistic culture. That individualism is even very strong on the left, in which people, will create a series of personal political positions that they hold dear, which is fine. But then if, a given politician or candidate or person that they're working with, he doesn't hold all of those positions or has different positions on something, then there's not an attempt to so often an attempt to reach out to common ground, but rather an attempt to separate yourself from those people. And I think that, too often today, functionally, what solidarity means, when I or you or somebody uses the term solidarity today, what they really mean is, I want you to do what I want you to do to support me, without any kind of the obligation side of that, which was central to the beginnings of the word solidarity and its usage in the 19th century. That it was about mutual respect and mutual action. And a lot of times we've lost that today. But on the plus side, I do think that especially younger people are very angry and very much about demanding significant change that generations, including very much a Gen Xer, absolutely did not do. We are seeing the kinds of political upheaval caused by generations of this extreme individualism right now, as older generations, certainly the baby boomer generation, was very much reared on individualistic ideas, ironically, since they were built on the kind of collective framework that came out of the New Deal and the sort of solidarity that we were talking about at the auto light strike. And so you have this very atomized, angry politics now. And I think that with younger people, even if they're haven't really quite been trained on how to necessarily work out ideas of solidarity, there is an inherent belief that a lot of things have to change, and they have to change together. We're talking about climate change, we're talking about gun violence, we're talking about trans issues, and we're talking about things like student debt and economic inequality as these young people go into a workplace that is tremendously unequal.
Yeah, so some could argue we're already in that position of economic upheaval and pain and suffering for somewhere. It's almost a necessity, isn't it?
Well, I think it absolutely is. I mean, I think that there's a lot of issues today in which, when I talk to my students, there's a sense of common sense politics here, right? That the environment should be protected, that we shouldn't be shooting each other, that, student debt shouldn't be a huge issue for them, that everybody should have access to a decent job. All of these things are sort of seen by a lot of, especially younger people, I think, as being something that should be above politics. And yet it's not. It's all bogged down by this, right-wing extremism and corporate domination of America that we've seen. And I think that, we are absolutely in a desperate situation on a lot of these issues, especially climate. And I think that this kind of coming together and this new sort of generation of people working together and of trying to come together, which I think you can really trace back to Occupy and move it through the Bernie Sanders campaign and through a whole bunch of other stuff, the Wisconsin protests back in 2010 to the teacher strikes now, that there's a kind of collective of sort of people figuring out how to do this again. And so I think that I feel good about what a lot of younger people are doing, but there is still that sort of structure at the top that's stopping that widely popular and necessary change for being able to take hold.
Yeah. So last question I've got for you. What's the hope of the message coming out of the anniversary, the 89th anniversary of this electric auto light strike? What do you want people to take away from this? What's the takeaway here?
The takeaway is solidarity. The takeaway is a real form of solidarity. A solidarity where you go out and you personally do something to help other people, not in a charitable way, but it's standing up for their rights, for their dignity, because you're all standing up for your rights and your dignity. And so I think that, we can think of tomorrow, April 13th, or April 12th, I should say, and, going into May with May Day and all of this and all of the labor actions that have happened in May is a time to rethink what solidarity really means and to ask yourself, what is your obligation to your fellow workers, not their obligation to you? What is your obligation to them? Because in Toledo, we saw that pay off with a major victory, and we saw that pay off repeatedly through the New Deal era and that classic mid-20th century period of union victory.
There you go, Eric. I appreciate the time and the insight. Outstanding stuff. Thanks so much, Eric Loomis, professor of history and the blogger over at Lawyers, Guns, and Money blog. Make sure you check that out. Also the author of A History of America in 10 Strikes. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that labor organizer Frank Norman disappeared from the Lakeland, Florida area and was never heard from again. It's believed he was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Norman was organizing citrus workers in the northern part of the state. The citrus groves, cigar factories, and textile mills in the area maintained a highly segregated workforce. The Klan terrorized workers and labor organizers that dared to disrupt this segregation by attempting to organize workers across racial lines. Klan members marched in parades through workers' neighborhoods and burnt crosses near union meetings. The next year, another union organizer, Joseph Shoemaker, was kidnapped by the Klan. Shoemaker had come to Florida from Vermont to organize cigar workers. 44 Klan members took Shoemaker and 2 other men 14 miles into the woods outside of Tampa. Shoemaker's leg was plunged into boiling hot tar. He was beaten and tortured and left for dead. When he was found, doctors tried to save his life by amputating his leg. But after 9 agonizing days, he died from his injuries. The investigation into the crime showed collaboration between the Klan and the local police. 5 policemen were convicted and sentenced to just 4 years in jail for their role in the terror attack. But the next year, their sentences were overturned and they were released. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of Norman or Shoemaker. These 2 men and countless others forgotten by history gave their lives trying to organize workers and stand up for racial justice. The Klan terrorized union organizers across the South, in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, remember how Donald Trump said he loves the poorly educated? I gotta think that's a GOP, I gotta think that's one of their their hard lines, because I look at what's going on in Missouri right now. The Missouri House of Representatives, Republicans voted to defund the state's libraries. They so loved the poorly educated that they want to make more of them. And that's the only thing I can come up with in this. Why would you vote to take, out of a $45.6 billion state budget, a couple $1 million? Why would you choose that? Other than this is about punishing libraries for being open and welcoming and to everybody, not to just your ideological insanity. Yeah. Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
Totally insane.
Par for the course. What's up?
Well, I'm reading the newspaper. I'm listening to the news and all this, and I have just come to the conclusion that somehow or the other, I don't even know at this point. It's like somebody's doing it. I guess it's the wealthy, because I don't believe in this, the conspiracy theory. It's a secret society. We know who it is. It's the Republicans.
It's not secret.
But, yeah, it's not a secret. It's just like they are trying to make everybody so miserable so they can push their own little twisted beliefs on everyone. It's just mind-numbing that people are sitting back and allowing this to happen.
Well, I mean, I empathize with some folks who they're on the treadmill, they're on the hamster wheel like the hamster, just trying to keep up, just trying to keep a roof over the kid's head, food on the table, just trying to make sure the car doesn't break down so they don't lose their job. People are just they're trying, man, and they're struggling, and we've got a political system that's so broken. Because we are so divided that it's, never going to help those folks. But sadly, those folks can't get off the treadmill long enough to go, hey, we can make real change.
I know it between that and then the ones who seem to buy into this conspiracy stupidity, living in an alternate universe. I'm just going, really. At this point, I'm going, I don't know. Maybe the meteorite should hit and just blast it all off the earth.
No, I would prefer not that.
Well, me neither, but, it's just mind-numbing at times, and it's crazy. But you have a good evening.
Appreciate it, Alice. Thanks so much. No, I mean, look, we've talked about this a number of times. The reality is there's no secret society. The wealthy, they're not secret about it. They are very happy to let you know that they've got all the money and you don't. And they exercise that power in a variety of ways. I look at this Clarence Thomas thing. I'm watching the Republicans now line up behind Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is an American hero. Clarence Thomas is our guy. No, Clarence Thomas is bought and paid for. And there should be no surprise. All of these guys have these personal friends, have always had it. Which is why it's rare that legislation, laws, whatever, Supreme Court decisions, why this stuff rarely goes the way for working people. How do you defend a Supreme Court justice taking a $500,000 free vacation, a 9-day Indonesian free vacation on a yacht, $500,000? If you or I were to go on this trip, it cost us $500,000. But hey, he's got a friend. And this is one of those things. And it's one of those angering moments where you go, I think I have the wrong friends. I think I need richer friends. But look, there's a quid pro quo there. It's not like, hey, Clarence, I took you on that vacation. Get me this. It's simply, hey, Clarence, I've got some friends who are thinking about some stuff. Perfect example. I had a friend who was in Congress a number of years ago. His name was Phil Hare. He was a congressman from Illinois. And I asked him, I go, so who's buying votes? And he goes, nobody's ever bought my vote. Nobody's ever bought votes. What they do is they buy my ear 15 minutes at a time. Every time I have to make a phone call and ask for a campaign donation, I get to hear their problem. So before they write me the check, they tell me what's wrong. And now imagine listening to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of those people who are donating to your campaign who all have the same problem. You're naturally going to go, well, hey, my campaign, people are going to need this. I'm going to help out my campaign people. I'm going to help out my friends. They want to keep me in office. And, I look at the Supreme Court justices that we've got. They were put in there on purpose because ideologically, they're on the exact same line. They've been extremely well vetted by the Federalist Society. So are we surprised that they're all basically on the same take? No, shouldn't be a shock at all. And it's not secret. Not even a little bit. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
Looking at Louisiana now, it can serve as a model for what we can expect to happen in the future.
Scientists find a dramatic, abnormal rise in sea levels in the southeast.
Our proposed rule would dramatically reduce the number of people with elevated cancer risk from breathing air toxics.
Biden EPA limits air pollution from chemical and plastics plants. Plus,
there's a bell to left. That's gone. It's out of Tiger Stadium.
Global warming is boosting home runs in Major League Baseball.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Leave my gas stove, my air conditioner, my light bulbs, red meat, SUV, and especially my toilet paper alone.
Hey, Sean Hannity, after lying to your audience for all of these years, don't you find it strange that not a single one of those things has been taken from you? Food for thought. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, never mind that liar, Sean Hannity. What truths do you have to share with us today?
Well, first up, March 2023 was the second warmest March ever recorded since record-keeping began in the 1850s. That's according to Europe's climate change service, Copernicus. The fact that March 2023 clocked in as the second hottest March is very concerning as it arrives at the tail end of a La Niña weather pattern that tends to cool global temperatures. Sea ice extent in both the Arctic and Antarctic are also at near record lows.
So we had a La Niña. It should have been cooler this year. We ended up with the second warmest March ever.
Sadly, yes.
Okay.
Ominously, the temperature of the world's oceans also hit a new all-time record high last week since satellite records began in 1980, according to new data from NOAA. Scientists say the new record is causing rare, simultaneous marine heat waves around the planet. And the new data strongly suggests we'll see a warming El Niño pattern coming later this year, which tends to spike global temperatures and intensify extreme weather disasters like heat waves, storms, and floods. It's a great time to get ready now before extreme weather hits your area. You can get started at the website ready.gov. In related news, multiple new studies have documented an abnormal and dramatic rise in sea levels along the U.S. Gulf and southeastern coasts over just the last decade. One federal tide gauge at a site near New Orleans recorded sea level now 8 inches higher than in 2006. Sea level rise is not uniform, but all of the studies found a similar accelerating trend since 2010 across the U.S. Gulf and Southeast, rising on average about an inch every 2 years, a rate that one scientist called, quote, unprecedented in at least 120 years. The new data raises new concerns that coastal economic and industrial hubs like New Orleans, Miami, and Houston are at more risk from rising seas and earlier than previously predicted, alongside some of the nation's most exposed and poorest regions. Some good news, the Environmental Protection Agency has proposed new air pollution standards for carcinogenic chemicals from chemical and plastics plants nationwide, aimed at reducing harmful toxic emissions across the country. The first update to the rules in 20 years will curb releases of more than 80 hazardous chemicals that drift beyond a facility's property lines into nearby residential areas and will primarily affect industrial facilities along the Gulf Coast, in Ohio, and West Virginia. Standing in front of smokestacks of Louisiana's Cancer Alley, EPA Administrator Michael Regan said the new rules will significantly reduce the risks of asthma, cancer, and other ailments for people living near those industrial sites.
The number of people with elevated risk would drop by an astounding 96%. Everyone in this country deserves clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and the opportunity to live a healthy life.
Some more good news. Retail giant Walmart is dramatically expanding its electric vehicle fast charging network. Axios reports Walmart plans to install fast chargers at thousands of its stores across the country by 2030, a major expansion beyond its current 280 locations. The company says 90% of Americans live within 10 miles of a Walmart, so the move will put fast EV charges within reach of far more drivers.
Yeah, but you have to go to Walmart.
Finally, researchers at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire crunched data from 100,000 Major League Baseball games, finding that higher temperatures caused a surge in the number of homers hit out of the park. Why? Because hotter air is thinner, causing less drag on the ball. The study estimates that since 2010, global warming has delivered nearly 60 more home runs per baseball season than might otherwise occur. So, yes, more home runs are more likely as global temperature rises.
Because of the drag on the balls.
Yes!
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news coming out of Maryland. Their governor, Governor Wes Moore, he has signed into law an increase in the minimum wage. Pennsylvania is still waiting for you. It's been, what's it been, 17 years since we've raised the minimum wage here in Pennsylvania on the state level. Well, Maryland has raised it to, starting next January 1st, $15 an hour. That is a good thing. They say it's going to help about 126,000 Maryland households. We will see. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's about damn time. And here to share some thoughts on how important this is and why business should be behind it, I've asked Aaron Sayedian to come talk with us. Aaron is the owner of Well Paid Maids, their website, wellpaidmaids.com. Aaron, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So were you at the event today where the governor signed this into law?
Yes, I was. I didn't get my pen, but I was there.
They're
giving out free pen. Yeah, they're giving out free pens.
I've got my pen from when Rendell signed it back in 2006. And I'm going, I hope there's going to be another one next year. And it's that was what I said to him, and it didn't. There hasn't been one for a lot of years. So tell me about the event.
Well, it was a very kind of triumphant event. Governor Moore was there to tout not only this, but an increase in the child tax credit for Maryland workers as well, as part of a push against child poverty. It's a big issue in Maryland, like it is everywhere really. And one concern in Maryland is also that in recent years we passed a large education bill. The Kerwin Act that funnels a lot more money into education, but recent statistics that have been released on child poverty in the state of Maryland and how that would interface with that education law indicates that it's going to cost a lot more than they thought it would, and so it's kind of related to that, but of course it's its own issue on its own legs.
So now this is a pretty big jump up to $15 an hour, because I remember the first iteration of this, it was an incremental thing, if I remember right. But this is a jump, from this January 1st, it's $15 an hour. That's a pretty sizable jump from where it is right now, isn't it?
Yeah. So somewhere around $13 right now. And so it'll be a significant jump to happen in less than a year. Absolutely. But that's one thing too that I'm kind of as I've been advocating for this minimum wage increase and others, is that what sounds scary, what sounds as like, wow, that's a jump, and it is, it's great for workers. The thing that we constantly hear from the business community is, the sky is going to fall. It's going to kill us. It's going to put us out of business. But when I think of running my own business, the idea that there's going to be some marginal increase to the wages we pay, whether it's $1 or $2 or something like that, it's really not something that's top of mind for me. And I really challenge the idea that it's what keeps other business owners awake at night.
Now, also one of the arguments I make, and I got to ask, as a business owner, when are you moving to Pennsylvania? Because we're told now that the minimum wage is going to be $15 an hour, more than double what it is here in the state of Pennsylvania, still at $7.25 because of the federal increase. Pennsylvania state law is still $7.15. You should be moving to Pennsylvania. We got cheap exploitable labor here.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, it's an opportunity to, I think, do a lot of good. And because, there's an unfortunate dynamic, which is folks in state capitals care about what people who own businesses say more than they care about what workers say or what, union representatives say. And so, like it or not, having business voices to say, this bill is actually not just not a problem, but it's something that's good for business and ultimately good for all of us is something that's really useful. So I agree with you. We should be in Pennsylvania, and I think it would be an asset to the fight to raise the minimum wage there.
Yeah, but I got to think that your business wouldn't operate well out of Pennsylvania. I got to assume your clients are going to be in Maryland, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have a branch in New York City, and so it's just about a year old, and so we'll see how that goes. But in theory, there's nothing to preclude a well-paid Mates Pittsburgh, a well-paid Mates Philadelphia. So I'm totally open to the idea.
There you go. So in talking about how this benefits the local community, because I've been making this argument for years that when working people have more money in their pockets, they're able to go and support Main Street, and that an increase in the minimum wage should be celebrated by small businesses. Because that increase in wages is really their money. It's the money walking into the door. It's really the big corporations. It's the National Federation of Small Business. It's the NFIB. It's the Restaurant Association. It's those people who are really fighting it. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just this past Christmas season, we had an employee. She told me hey, this is the first year that I could afford to buy a real Christmas tree, right? And that's a really small thing, but it's a nice example because what the NFIBs of the world would have you believe is oh, you're gonna put this poor Christmas tree farm in Western Maryland out of business with this marginal increase in the minimum wage, a few bucks here and there. But the real story is that no, their line can be twice as big next year because more people have more money in their wallets to spend. And so I think that when you think of what are business problems, the biggest business problem is do I have customers and am I going to have more this year than last year? Not will one of my costs increase by some small factor.
Now, the other part of this, and again, this is kind of the recurring conversation around, it's one of those which side are you on parts. As an employer, you want people who are going to be qualified. You're going to want your best people. You're going to want them to stay. You're going to pay them a little bit better so that they do stay. And this raising of the floor, I think, gives people the option that they don't have to go chasing nickels at every opportunity. No.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've calculated that turnover in our company costs around $6,000 per employee, and that's for the cost of advertising the job again, buying a new set of equipment and supplies, interviewing candidates, training new people. And so, this kind of churn and burn model that a lot of employers are addicted to, I think that people fall into that trap because oftentimes the costs associated with it are not very visible. And so they think of it as something they're doing to save money. But if you actually do an honest accounting of how much it costs you to constantly be firing people or having people quit because you're not paying good wages, not paying good benefits, I think it's a really favorable profile in terms of the accounting to say, it makes sense to be an employer that pays a living wage and offers a full benefits package because the fewer people we've got coming out the door means that we can grow, and that's ultimately how you have a good result in business.
No, that's a good thing. The one downside to this, they didn't index this to inflation, and that's one of the things that just drives me insane. That we could solve this problem once and for all. You get it to a reasonable wage, and that never allow it to be eroded by inflation. Again, make sure that it continues to go up as it needs to. Or look, in some states, if it goes backwards, it goes backwards. But that index, I think, is so important.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's the whole reason we're doing this speed up. The whole reason that this is a priority that people understand is because of the incredible inflation we've had over the past few years, and how what folks thought was a high number, what back when the law was originally passed, is starting to look like not such a high number. So it is unfortunate that indexing didn't make it in. It was one of the governor's priorities, and it's important to remember, Maryland is controlled by Democrats, and so the people that decided that they don't want indexing to be a part of this are other members of the democratically controlled legislature. From my understanding, it pertains to wanting to be able to have this power in years to come, to basically be the folks that every year meet and could decide this. And of course, a lot of things flow from that in terms of being able to fundraise off of it, being able to run on it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's stupid.
So, yeah,
I'm sorry,
perverse
it's just dumb.
incentives. Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I mean, $15 an hour next year is great. I mean, it's good. It's a good, huge step in the right direction. It's still not at the front of the pack. I mean, you're kind of somewhere, there are a lot of states that are further down the road. I look at New York is talking about raising the minimum wage up to what, $21 an hour?
Yeah, 21.25.
Now, if you live in New York City, I think you need that. But the rest of the state, I understand there's a lag that, as this bill that they've got has been thrown out, there's a year lag to get up to that. But still, $21 an hour, that's a reasonable wage. That's something you can put a roof over your head. You can put food on the table for the kids. There's dignity in that. That's where we should be fighting for.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the living wage movement is, smartly polishing off this, fight for 15, bill of goods, and we need to quickly kind of rejigger our aims and our goals to a higher number. Inflation it's still here, and not only we need that higher anchoring number, we need to make sure it's chained to CPI so that we can stop doing this, right?
Yeah,
it's a waste of everyone's energy. There are other things to focus on in terms of having a more pro-worker economy than just the minimum wage. And the fact that we have to keep doing this year after year, term after term, means that, all the effort of, advocacy groups and labor unions, et cetera, businesses like me, it's just kind of rinsed and reused on this same topic.
Drew, listening at KTNF in Minnesota, asks, why not raise the minimum wage to $100 an hour if you're going to raise it at all? I'm so tired of that argument. Doesn't that make you angry when people throw out these ridiculous numbers and you go, why not just make it $100 an hour? Because that's stupid, Drew. It's not going to happen. But let me ask you, why not raise it to $100 an hour?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we still need businesses that are employing people to be financially viable, and so we can't throw out numbers that would ruin the economics of any enterprise. But I think that I always like the term living wage. I think the idea, and I think that resonates with people, the idea that at a bare minimum, job shouldn't pay less than it actually costs to live and have a normal life on, is something that's deeply rooted in American history and politics. It's not a radical thing to ask for, and it's I think where people's heads are and should be at in terms of what ought the minimum wage be.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Aaron Sayedian. Aaron is the owner of Well Paid Maids, their website, wellpaidmaids.com. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that and reward Aaron for his willingness to come out and fight for his workers and all workers. Now, one of the things that I've always been in favor of is instead of a minimum wage, is more like a prevailing wage, where it's like in the construction trades, where it's, you figure out how much it costs for that job. You give people the ability to locally craft a wage. It's going to ensure that they can afford, rent and bills and food on the table and that kind of stuff, and push for that as opposed to, just kind of flat line, $21 an hour. Like I said, in New York City, that might get you by. You're going to do probably really well in upstate New York. So there's this view of mine that maybe a prevailing wage is something we should really be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good example of something where if we could index on a high minimum wage and put this to bed, there are all kind of things people dream up, like sector boards and things like that, bargaining across industries or wage setting and things like that. But it's also kind of speculative and fantastical because we keep having to pour all of our energy into this topic time and time again. But yeah, I can think of a lot of schemes that would make sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to move that along, because there are a lot of good ideas out there. But if we're still talking about just bare minimums, if we've got to fight this hard to get the bare minimum raised up a little bit, there's something wrong with that. Last question I've got for you, going forward, as you said, the Democrats in Maryland wanted to hold on to this for future opportunities, fundraising, elections, whatever. What should working people do? Is this the end of the road? Where does this go from here? And what would you advise for working people in states that haven't raised their minimum wage?
Well, I think that it's important for everyone to know how well organized the business community is in every state capital in America. And so, I've testified on this issue in Richmond, Maryland, at the federal level. And the lobbyists they just bubble out of the floor, right? They're there every day. They know everybody's names, and by and large, except for a few large labor unions, they're there to represent the business community. And so, I think the more that folks can actually show up and advocate for these types of bills to pass, and also to tell their personal stories of how they've been impacted by maybe what they've not been able to receive as a worker, or what they've not been able to do for their family. I think it can only have a strong impact.
No, in fact, the thing you just said there is the most important part of it, that workers need to understand how organized the business community really is. I think that is important. But Aaron, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Good on you for standing up for working people. I appreciate your time. Hope folks will take a look at the website, wellpaidmaids.com. We'll get links out on social media. Aaron Sayedian, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick. Bye-bye.
Let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, that comment Aaron made right there, I think it's the most important part of the whole discussion. Yeah, it's great that Westmore raised the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. We should have been indexed. I'm just saying. Wish that would have happened. But saying working people don't realize how well organized the business community really is. How organized the moneyed interest of this country really is. Because they get what they want. Think about this for a second. In my state of Pennsylvania, they have not raised the minimum wage in our state house for 17 years. Last time it happened was 2006. Ed Rendell was governor. We went through, Tom Corbett. We went through, Tom Wolf. We've now got Josh Shapiro. All those years. He went through a term with Ed Rendell. All those years, no increase. And I remember at the time getting the pen, because I think I still have it. It's in a little frame, and because it was one of the first times I go, wow, let me give you a pen. It doesn't write, just so you know. It's purely ceremonial, and that was one of those things that just cracked me up. But you got the shell anyway. But anyway, I mean, it was one of those things that I said, now, do we get one next year? Because are we going to make this, are we going to make this better? And the answer was, yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna work harder, because one of the things that Republicans got in that 2006 law was preemption laws. They were, and again, this is where organized money, they understand what they're doing. They know, the business community knows what they're doing. They spend a lot of money on think tanks to preempt down the road. And what they did is they said, yeah, we're gonna allow you to raise the minimum wage back in 2006 up to $7.15, because I still remember the chant, $7.15, nothing in between. And there's been nothing in between now and then either. But they would not, they had put it in there that it had to be raised at the state level. That means Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Altoona, Erie, Allentown, none of those places could increase their minimum wage locally. And they were smart about it. Look, they knew that there would be organizing going on in places where the cost of living is a little bit higher. So, they made it to where you're just stuck. And look, in those places, and this is that rural urban war that's been going on for a very long time. You've got these rural representatives who don't know what it costs to live in a city and don't care about those because they're not their constituents, sticking it to the urban areas by saying, no, you can't raise your minimum wage even just a little bit. And this, because I listen to the Marjorie train wrecks and all of them. And they say, well, it's the left that's done this. No, this has been going on for a very long time, and it's this kind of back and forth that goes on that's created the environment we're in, which is why I'm a prevailing wage guy. I think if you have a wage in an area, you say this is what the wage for this job is, and it's paid for everybody, so that we go back to competing on, again, service and quality and who can do the most productive job, instead of who's willing to sacrifice their kids' future. For me, the way forward is work should make your life better. One of the things I agreed with Ronald Reagan on is, the best anti-poverty program is a job. And I've amended that to be a union job, one with good wages and health care and retirement security and a voice on the job. That's the future. But sadly, we've got too many in our state houses across this country who, they're bought and paid for by the organized money. I remember all the ALEC legislation that was, for a while, everyone was finding. You think that's gone away? No, they're just hiding it better. So again, good on Maryland. I wish they would have inflated it. They would have pegged it to inflation so they wouldn't have to keep doing this. But here we are. I want to get to this real quick. Reality, most Americans, according to the most recent Pew Research poll, is supportive of the medication, I guess the medical abortion pills that the Texas judge has just made illegal. And 53% of adults say that they're in favor of this. And what I find interesting is and this is where Republicans really have a problem, because they're losing a generation. What has come out, the 538 blog has come out and said that there are around 66,000, almost 67,000 people who are unable to receive a legal abortion in their home state between July and December of last year. And that number includes more than 43,000 people who are unable to receive abortion because their state banned it. So the question, Arizona, South Carolina, Ohio, Georgia, North Dakota, Indiana. So you go, what did these people do? They said an additional 22,680 whose home states severely restricted or reduced it as well. What did these people do? Did they have children? And can they afford them? Did they put them up for adoption? This is kind of where my mind is going. What's happening since we're forcing people to have children? What's going to be the consequence in this? And the social spending that's going to go up with it, because we haven't seen conservatives really pushing the kind of legislation that I think needs to be done. And you don't see them pushing, jobs programs. You don't see them. It's one of those things where you go, we're going to make you do this, but we're not going to help you get to a place where you can actually do it. And that's the frustrating part. as I've said in the past, I personally am not in favor of abortion. I think it should be safe and legal. I don't want poor working class women dying in alleys because we know rich women are going to get whatever they need. I don't want my daughters being in that position. But I think we should be passing laws to encourage people to say, you know what, if you do have a kid, that kid's not going to go hungry. That kid's not going to, not have medical care, not going to have an opportunity to get an education. We should be full tilt boogie moving toward policies to encourage people instead of forcing them. And this is where Republicans, I think, are going to continue for the next several election cycles to take a real thrashing. And I think this Nancy Mace, this representative from South Carolina, I think she's getting it. I think she's got it, actually, because she's saying that, the FDA and the people who are in charge of this medical abortion pill shouldn't listen to this judge because she understands that there are Republicans who are in favor of this. And that could mean bad news for their electorate. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you seen this? I want to know. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that labor organizer Frank Norman disappeared from the Lakeland, Florida area and was never heard from again. It's believed he was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Norman was organizing citrus workers in the northern part of the state. The citrus groves, cigar factories, and textile mills in the area maintained a highly segregated workforce. The Klan terrorized workers and labor organizers that dared to disrupt this segregation by attempting to organize workers across racial lines. Klan members marched in parades through workers' neighborhoods and burnt crosses near union meetings. The next year, another union organizer, Joseph Shoemaker, was kidnapped by the Klan. Shoemaker had come to Florida from Vermont to organize cigar workers. 44 Klan members took Shoemaker and 2 other men 14 miles into the woods outside of Tampa. Shoemaker's leg was plunged into boiling hot tar. He was beaten and tortured and left for dead. When he was found, doctors tried to save his life by amputating his leg. But after 9 agonizing days, he died from his injuries. The investigation into the crime showed collaboration between the Klan and the local police. 5 policemen were convicted and sentenced to just 4 years in jail for their role in the terror attack. But the next year, their sentences were overturned and they were released. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of Norman or Shoemaker. These 2 men and countless others forgotten by history gave their lives trying to organize workers and stand up for racial justice. The Klan terrorized union organizers across the South in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
My city's daily newspaper has gotten so emaciated it should be in hospice care. Its front section is down to 6 pages, half of which are cheap ads, and nearly all of its articles are out-of-date cut-and-paste pieces bought from out-of-state content providers. This embarrassment, put out by the Gannett chain of over 1,100 cadaverous papers, pretends to be the news source for Austin, a vibrant city of 1 million people and the capital of the second-largest state in America. Gannett, owned by a multi-billion-dollar Japanese hedge fund, profits by buying up local papers, firing most of the news staff, raising prices, selling off the paper's assets, then killing the paper. If your town's publication is now a Gannett property, look to Salinas, California for its future. The 152-year-old Salinas Californian was this important region's main news artery until its new hedge fund owners started hacking. The paper was down to 1 reporter last December, but that lone journalist quit, and the Californian is now a newspaper without reporters, meaning no coverage of elections, city hall, sports, police, workplace issues, etc. The Salinas paper is technically alive, overseen until recently by another Gannett paper located 300 miles away. Now, says the chain's comically named Center for Community Journalism, Salinas residents can get their news by reading Gannett's national paper, USA Today. This is Jim Hightower saying, actually, Gannett's bosses are making major investments in themselves. CEO Mike Reed's salary this year is $8 million, and the global chain's owners will spend $100 million for a stock buyback scheme that will artificially jack up their own wealth. This is a blockbuster story of real news affecting real people and democracy itself. So how many Gannett newspapers do you guess are covering it?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday, the teaching staff at Rutgers University went on strike. Now, this is important because this is the first time these staff members have gone on strike in 256 years. So you go, how? Why? Why? I guess the big question is why. Especially when you look at, Rutgers University has been one of, at least in my thought, one of the leaders in labor education and all of that. So what forced all this? Well, they're trying to stick up for the part-time workers, the part-time professors, the part-time workers, the people who higher ed has been screwing for the last several years, and good on them. And here to share some thoughts on what's going on at Rutgers, especially now that the Rutgers president, this Jonathan Holloway, has said that if they don't come up with something in the next couple of days, he may go to the state and make them legal action. That's why, again, this is crazy to me. That's why I've asked Cindy Hamamovich to come talk with us. She is a history professor at the University of Georgia. She's also the LACHA president, the Labor and Working Class History Association, their website, lacha.org. Cindy, thanks for taking time for us.
Nice to talk to you.
So I'm looking at this, and the first strike action in 256 years. Is that right?
Well, I'm looking at the same things you're looking at, and that's what they say. It's quite remarkable.
I mean, it is remarkable, and it's remarkable what's happened in the field of higher education around, what used to be solid, middle class wage employment and careers. We've now turned this into, people need 5 or 6 of these gigs just to make ends meet.
Yeah, that's right. For many people in this profession, the ivory tower is looking more and more like a coal mine. It's there. Just a majority of people who are teaching university students are contingent laborers, so they're hired either by the year or by the course, and there's no job security if you're being paid by the course. Then you have to teach a huge number of courses in order to make a living.
And that's not, I don't know how that's conducive to the education that students get. I don't know how it's conducive to the study of the field of the person who's teaching the course. This just doesn't seem to be the right direction for me.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I certainly have colleagues who are contingent faculty members who are fantastic, who are incredibly devoted teachers. And some universities have tried to make a kind of quasi-permanent status where they'll promote people who are on these contingent contracts, which allows them to have longer-term contracts, like a 5-year guarantee. But it's still an insecure position, and then there are many, many more people who are far more insecure than that. And, there's only so much you can do when you're teaching 4, 5, 6 courses at a time. How much time can you spend on each student? How much time can you spend in office hours? What happens several years later when a student needs a letter of recommendation and they have no idea where you've gone? It's hard on the faculty members for sure, but there are also consequences for how we run our universities and the experience that students have as well.
Yeah, and when I saw this story, I'm like, good on these professors and these workers for standing up. 256 years without a work action like this is impressive, but sadly, just I guess a sign of our times. But the reason I reached out to you guys at Launch is you guys came out with a statement that said, look, if this strike goes on any much longer, we have I guess you have an event scheduled somewhere near the campus, on the campus.
Well, it's not. It's not just an event. It's our conference that we hold every 2 years. It moves around, and it just so happens to be hosted this year by the great folks at the Labor Center at Rutgers. And lo and behold, they're on strike. So,
yeah, and your events are fantastic. I've been to two of them over the years, and I find them just fascinating. But the reason I bring this up is you said, look, if this continues, we're not crossing the picket line. We're going to stand with these folks, and we'll have to move our conference somewhere else. And I said, this is important to point out and to congratulate and to give recognition where due, is saying, look, we're standing with these people. I think we need to reinforce that across society.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way we can ask several hundred labor historians to cross a picket line. It's just not going to happen. It would be a Herculean effort to move this conference off campus. I mean, we have 7 sessions going at any one time, so it'll be really hard and it'll be expensive to do it. But we don't really feel like we have any choice in the matter. This is such an important event, and we support it.
Yeah, see, I think the best thing to do is don't have the event anywhere else. Just do it on the picket line. That would be a real...
Well, that would be great. And certainly one of our members, suggested to me, well, could we do it outside? But you have to imagine 7 sessions at once, some of them big, some of them small, people needing, you need to be able to hear, and it just wouldn't work. Many of us had the experience of teaching college classes outside as a result of the pandemic, and boy, it didn't work really well. It's fine if you have 8 students and you can sit in a little circle, but in the if you're trying to talk to 200 or 30 or 50, there's no way.
Yeah, I have this vision in my head. You could just do like the Occupy People's mic thing. I mean, this could be a real show.
You're giving me a headache just thinking about it. But we have some other locations in mind, and we're talking to them and figuring out, the logistics and the costs and so forth. And hopefully this will be long over by the time our conference begins, which is May 18th. But we'll see.
Yeah, no, the hope is that it will be quick, because look, nobody wants to go on strike. I've been on strike during my working career. It's not something I wanted, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do. It is the last arrow in the quiver. But again, the reason that I wanted to talk to you is I think it's important to show people how to support people on strike, and sometimes you have to sacrifice. And being part of a community is important. And what's the old saying? The bigger the strike, the shorter the strike. The more people on the picket line, the shorter the strike. This could be one of those moments.
Absolutely. Well, they had incredible support for the strike among the union members. I mean, it was an overwhelming vote, so that doesn't seem to be an issue.
Now, in looking at this, and again, you're not in the negotiations and all of this.
Oh no.
And I don't expect you to say, "Oh, I know what's going on," but this had to get to a point to where these folks were just feeling they weren't getting anywhere with the administration. And again, being the last arrow in the quiver, it's what you have to do sometimes, isn't it?
Well, the thing that's so interesting to me is this is a university that has multiple unions, and I used to work at York University in Toronto, and it too had multiple unions, a union for faculty, a union for the contingent people, a union for the grad students, for staff, and so forth. So these multiple unions have come together. They're not negotiating separately. They've formed a coalition. And you have, tenure track much more secure faculty walking out in support of the people who are much more vulnerable among them. So it's really important for that reason as well.
It's one of those events that you just wow. How did it get to this point? You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Cindy Hahamovich. She is a history professor at the University of Georgia, also the president of LACHA, the Labor and Working Class History Association. I did want to ask you about the event, and hopefully people who will be in the Rutgers area in the middle of May, maybe can attend. Tell me what it is you guys do and why it's important.
Absolutely. Well, LACHA has been around for over a quarter of a century now, and we're an organization made up of historians, but other people who study, who are interested in labor, by union members, K through 12 teachers, archivists, all sorts of people who are interested in history and who are especially interested in labor and working class history. And we have a fantastic journal, which is called Labor, Studies in Working Class History, which you get if you become a member. And we keep our membership dues low so that people can afford it. And we have, different scales for people with different resources. And we meet every 2 years. We have our journal in between. We do all sorts of programming in the interim, some things in person, some things online. And one of the things we do, for example, is we have a fantastic committee that's trying to create resources that teachers can use in their classrooms to teach labor and working class history. So, for example, they ask historians to take a primary document, something from the past that they like to teach with, that they think is really revealing, and then kind of unpack it for the teacher so that sort of they know what a historian, is seeing in it, and then sort of helping to guide a conversation about it so a teacher can read it, think about it, plunk it into their curriculum. It's not a whole lesson plan because teachers make their own lesson plans. They know what they're doing much better than we do. The idea is to get working class history into classrooms and, for people to understand this really fascinating past. So the organization does lots of things, and anybody can join.
No, it's important, the work that you guys do. In fact, I love having labor historians on to talk about, what has happened in the past and more importantly, how the past, affects the current and possibly the future. In fact, we just had my friend Eric Loomis on talking about tomorrow's the 89th anniversary of the electric auto light strikeout, the Battle of Toledo, if you will. And understanding why it's important to remember that, because sadly our education system doesn't do a very good job of teaching working class history.
No, unfortunately, it doesn't. I mean, I certainly didn't get any of it when I was in school, and I was in a great school system, but it's just, I think in probably some parts of the country it may have penetrated a little bit more, but other than a couple of mentions of the Industrial Revolution and John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, you're off to something else.
Yeah, I learned about the Molly Maguires, and I learned they were all criminals. And you go, wait a second. Now that I'm older, and you look back and you go, yeah, that's the corporate view. I get that. I got the corporate view of labor education.
Yeah. No, it's important. It's something really important that we do, and we also try to, increasingly this organization, which really started out as an organization for academics, has become an organization that supports the organizing on campuses as well, because we're not just studying, coal miners and textile workers. We are now subjects of labor history as well, because the conditions on our universities have declined so much. So we also support organizing efforts, and we have, for example, a day-long organizing workshop for graduate students on the first day of the conference.
No, it's a lot of good work you guys do. I hope folks will check out the website. LAWCHA.org, LAWCHA.org. We'll get links out on social media. Any words for the people on the picket line there at Rutgers? Anything?
Oh, well, we're just so proud of them and supportive, and we hope that your listeners will contribute to the strike fund. And I should mention that the graduate students at the University of Michigan, the graduate TAs, teaching assistants, including my son, are also on strike. So that's another strike fund to contribute to. And we wish them all the best and solidarity.
Yeah. Workers fighting for dignity is a good thing. Cindy, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Nice to talk to you.
You as well. Cindy Hamovich, she is, as I said, a history professor there at the University of Georgia. Make sure you check out the LAWCHA website where she's the president. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. For years, auto workers had participated in a series of sit-down strikes and walkouts. They had won union recognition from almost every major automaker in the country. But the Ford Motor Company, the giant of the American auto industry, would not budge. Ford used many tactics to undermine unionization. He hired many black workers with the idea that a racially divided workforce would be less likely to work together. He enlisted Detroit area pastors to recruit his workers. If a pastor would not support Ford's anti-union stance, then no members of that church would be hired. Ford also raised employee wages in an effort to win their loyalty. Ford created the Ford Service Department. The 8,000-member department included uniformed security who kept an eye out for union organizing, going so far as to use undercover spies to infiltrate union meetings. If none of those tactics worked, Ford simply fired thousands of workers who dared to speak out for a union. Despite all of this, the push for a union continued to grow. The effort was fueled in part by work speed-ups that led to more and more on-the-job injuries. Members of the Communist Party took a lead in organizing at Ford. This led to howls from the press about the red influence. Finally, on April 2nd, workers walked off the job to protest yet another round of firing union organizers. Some 85,000 workers marched in 27 picket lines. Despite Ford's effort to create a racial divide, more than 80% of the black workers joined the strike. Finally, today in labor history, Ford agreed to sit down with the United Auto Workers. At long last, one of the most anti-union employers in the U.S. had been brought to the bargaining table. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Got an email from Mickey listening on WAUK in Milwaukee. He says, Clarence Thomas is a crook. You're too easy on him. He should be impeached. We need to be as hard as the GOP. He said, look at Tennessee. They didn't play any games. They expelled the 2 black men for being out of line. Mickey, I don't disagree. We're kind of easy on these folks. The Clarence Thomas thing, seriously, is a big deal in my view. And it should be something that people across the political spectrum look at, because it's the reality of where we are. The right is losing their mind over Hunter Biden's laptop, over the fact that Hunter Biden had some business deal that he was able to profit off of using his name. And look, politicians, kids, and relatives have been doing that from the beginning of time. I remember the first politician I remember. Remember Billy Carter with Billy Beer? Of course, he was trying to sell his crappy beer off of his brother's name. This is how this is. And you expect that. But when people are in political office, like Clarence Thomas is, this is where this is different from me. He got caught with his hand in the vacation jar. $500,000 gig. And this is, one of many. And it's not just him. I'm not focusing just on Clarence Thomas. It should be all of them. The fact that they have such lax ethics rules that if you have a personal relationship with someone, you don't have to, they give you $1 million, you don't have to report that. No, they're just being friendly. It's crazy. It's crazy. And on both sides of the aisle, if we had a functional democracy, if we were in a functional system, both sides would be going, Clarence, what is wrong with you? Now, and again, this is one of these moments where years ago, and it's got to be now 10 years ago, Clarence was on, I think it was 60 Minutes, him and his wife, and they're driving this giant, big old RV, and he's talking about the things that he's gotten from, this statue and this, and they live in a palatial estate, man. At a time when Antonin Scalia was crying poverty because they don't make enough money. And I remember asking at the time, how is it they afford this kind of a lifestyle? Now you go, well, they're big-time attorneys who make big money. Not Clarence. Clarence was not the high-powered attorney. He was a government attorney. He was the head of the EEOC for a while. He made okay money, but he wasn't at the top of the game. This is an important moment. And we've been in these before where it's painfully apparent that the system's broken. As I've said a number of times, I don't believe that there was a quid pro quo here. And this is where you get into some gray area. I don't believe that Clarence called up his buddy Harlan and said, hey, buddy, I want to go on vacation. Take me on a $500,000 vacation. I don't believe that to be it. I believe it is you're part of the clan. You're part of the cabal. You're part of the group. You've been ushered through the Federalist Society. You've gone to this. You've done the party circuits. You know each other. You're friends. You're all friends. 1,000 of your closest friends as part of the Federalist Society who all have the same ideological agenda. You're all looking at the same prize, more for you, less for everybody else. This kind of narrow-minded ideology that's the only way you get in the door. It's not like they said, Clarence, we're going to pay you for this decision. No, he was put on that court because he was going to make that decision no matter what, because he had been groomed all along to be of that mindset. This isn't hard to figure out. The right has done this masterfully. They have created an entire system, and you've got to give them credit because they're masterful at it. You get into being a low-level campaign person, then you work your way up to working on a congressional campaign, and you work for a congressional office, and then you get yourself a think tank gig, and then you go back and forth between government, then you get yourself another think tank gig, and you start moving through different agencies, and they're vetting you all along the way. And the chosen few, they move forward with bigger and bigger prizes and bigger payouts. Till eventually they get put on these really important positions because they've been vetted. They know exactly what he's going to decide. There's no surprises. What's interesting to me is that Clarence Thomas has said something. There were decades Clarence Thomas never asked a question on the court. He already knew where he was going. He knew what his decision was going to be. He didn't have to ask. He already knew. I find it interesting he's talking now because he knows this is bad. Now, the Boberts and the MTGs and all of the right-wing blathering idiots are out there going, no, Clarence is a hero. Clarence is our guy. We support Clarence. Clarence is in trouble. Now, is anybody going to hold him accountable? No. He's not going to be impeached. The House isn't going to do that. But there should be an investigation. There should be people looking into this. And we should be demanding it. You, me, us. Because when a crook is a crook, you hold them accountable. Speaking of crook, I got to throw this out real quick. Evidently, an Ohio charity, Ohio Clean Water Fund, evidently is I guess now being sued by the Ohio Attorney General because they raised a boatload of money somewhere between, I don't know, $141,000. And evidently, you got to give them credit, I guess, on a certain level. Evidently, 131,000 of the 141,000 ended up in the pockets of the people who ran it. It was a giant fleece job. It was supposed to go to the people of East Palestine, supposed to help get them water and do all this stuff. Evidently, that didn't happen. So there is a suit, a lawsuit, going to hold them accountable, and we'll see what happens. I hope jail time. Should be what it is. Now, when I saw it, I saw Ohio Clean Water Fund, and I'm going, wait a second, and then my mind went, no, that's Clean Water Action. They're actually a reputable organization fighting for clean water for everyone. I went to the Clean Water Fund's website. It's all about just donations. So it's one of those things where you go, man, these more than 3,000 people who thought they were giving money to the people of East Palestine, they got screwed over. And even though it's a Republican in Ohio doing it, he's doing the right thing, and I support him. That's how we should be doing things. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.